Hello humans, George is here. By now you've read all about brouhaha and news articles and clickbaits making rounds talking about portal security breach. First of all, it's not breach, it's a data leak. At some point there was a mistake made by portal maker exposing this data. We covered this in details in CRM tip of the day number 1407. Jesus, that's 1407 tips. And now we're just going to dive in more details and visualize how that could have possibly happened, how to mitigate the risk, and how to ensure that your portal is secured and doesn't leak the data. So let's go. Let's take a look at the issue within the existing portal application provisioned before 15th of August. So I have this portal, not much to look at, it's just a standard portal. And let's go to portal management and let's create a list using the old style approach, not using Portal Studio but the old style. So let's go ahead and create a list.
I am sorry, George, but we no longer call things old. Classic is the word you are looking for. For example, use classic interface instead of old interface. And George is classic instead of George is old.
And let's say we go for contacts. And the table would be contact website. Let's go ahead and use active contacts view. So we'll just use single view active contacts. And here's the checkbox that enables table permissions. So we want to keep it off for now to see what the problem is. Let's go ahead and save the list. So far, no harm done. So we've got the list, but we need to surface it within the application. So let's go ahead and provision a page, a new page called contacts. Parent page would be home. Page template, let's go for the full page. Say it's published. And let's just go ahead and select this contact list view. Go ahead and save it. So what's the problem? The problem is when we go ahead and just browse the portal and go to the new page, contacts. It just displays whatever comes in active contacts. And remember, I'm not authenticated at the moment. I'm just an anonymous visitor who just happened to come across of that page. So what typically happens in these scenarios is people who design this, usually they say, hey, look, we have page that we need to restrict and enable it only for authorized users. So what they do is they go ahead and say, we need to create a web page access rule. A web page access rule, let's call it contacts website. We're looking for page contact. The right is restrict read, so we want to restrict read to that page. Once we've done that, we want to assign existing role, let's say authenticated users. So now we have a web page access rule that restricts the page contacts and restrict read on that page to authenticated users. So now when we go ahead and try to read this page, we redirect it to a sign-in page. So let's go ahead and sign, and we can access this page as a signed-in user. Sign out and redirect it back to sign-in page. And people leave it at that. What's the problem, you might ask? Well, the problem is that at some point people realize, oh, we want to access this data using web services. So there's this great tool called OData feeds that we can enable, and that will give us this data, and we can use it in JavaScript, we can use it elsewhere. So what they do, go to the list, they pick up that list, and they say, ooh, OData feed. Let's enable that. Give it a name, contacts, select the view, save the record, go to the portal, and now we can go OData/contacts, and we get the list of all the contacts in the system or active contacts. It's very handy, this list. We can use this URL to get RESTful web service returning contact data. We can use it in JavaScript. We can use it in integration scenarios. It's very handy, but it's leaking the data because it's now available for anonymous users just to go ahead and access it. What's worse is that you can go just /OData and you can see the list of collections that is available within the system. All OData collections will show up here. So I know contact is a collection, so I can now go /contacts and I get the data. It doesn't really matter that we have a web page access rule. If we go to the page, we get redirected to sign in, so access is denied for the page. So that gives kind of false sense of security to the business, and people forget that they enabled our data feed, and before you know, your data is out there on the internet available for anyone who wants to access it. Mitigation of that is very, very simple. You just go ahead into your list. You just enable table permissions. The moment you do that, when you try to get to OData contacts, we get access denied. So that was easy. Now, even if I remove this restrict read on the page, let me just go ahead and delete this rule. If I go ahead and try to access page contacts, I get you don't have permissions to view these records. How to fix that? You can go ahead and explicitly define permissions. And the best way to do it is within Portal Studio. So you just go ahead, press the kebab menu, go to Portal Studio, and go to Table Permissions, New Permissions, select Contacts, Access Type, we say Global Access, Read, and let's say I do want to give access to anonymous users. I can check the box, save it, and now when unauthenticated, I get a list of contacts. Here's the funny bit. We didn't assign permissions to authenticated users, so if I do go ahead and authenticate, I should get access denied, and I do get the message you don't have permissions to view these records. So you need to be very selective. Who do you give access to? And anonymous users are separate from authenticated users. So it's not like all-inclusive. So you have to include those separately. So now let's take a look how the experience changed in the portals provisioned after 15th of August. So let me change the environment. And in this environment, I have fresh portal. So let me go ahead and go to portal management, same as before. Go ahead and start provisioning the new list. So I go contacts, table name is contact, start a portal, add the view. I can go ahead and save it, but here's the difference. If we scroll down, see these table permissions? They are enabled by default. Yes, I can disable them. Guess what happens? I get the message, which is a warning, but at least it's very, very explicit. So you can enable this behavior where table permissions do not apply. But let's see if we can actually leak the data. So if we go to our data feed and enable our data feed, before we even move forward, it displays an error. So table permissions must be enabled before our data feed is enabled. So basically this combination that leaks the data is no longer in play. It's explicitly disabled. And we can do the same as before, but we won't be able to save it until we go to the general and enable table permissions. Now we can go ahead and save it, and we have to jump through the same hoops, effectively creating table permissions on contacts, assigning a role to those, and so on. But the experience is much better if you just go ahead and use Portal Studio to create new pages with the list views. So let's just go ahead and add a blank page, call it contacts, default template, page available to everyone, or I can restrict page to selected roles like authenticated users or administrators, something else. It's just basically creating web page access permissions under the hood. Very simple with one click, same functionality that takes me like creating 2 records and multiple boxes to fill. Here's just click, and done. Let's just go ahead and add a list. And we already have a list, so we just select it. And you see there is a shortcut to manage table permissions here. We've got additional settings like number of records per page and so on. So we can go ahead and manage table permissions straight from here. We can select the list. We can select table. Let's say global access, read, and we add the roles and we say authenticated users only can access that. If we go ahead and start browsing the portal, we go to the page contacts, we get you don't have permissions to access these records, which is expected. And if we sign in and go to contacts, we get the full view of the contact records. Brilliant. Use Portal Studio. And remember that portals provisioned after 15th of August will not let you leak the data. So how can you check if your portal does leak the data? So let's go back to our original environment. So let's go ahead, leak the data. So we go and we remove table permissions. We go to the list, OData feed enabled, active contacts, table permissions disabled. Here's the first method to detect. You just go to OData and you get the list of collections. So for each collection mentioned, it is a potentially data leakage. So you just open in private web page, go to your portal, go underscore OData, copy, paste, and you get the data back. If you do get the data back, it's leaking. The other way to do it is to go to the portal settings and go to portal administration. And within that, you have a command to run portal checker. Let's just go ahead and run portal checker. Takes a few seconds to run. Doot, 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 doot. And we have a warning. This is exactly what we talked about. Anonymous access to entity forms and entity lists is enabled. Could have used the name, but at least it's got ID that we can use to locate either entity list or entity form and figure it out. The rest passes, so we're good to go. So we need to go and fix it, find the entity list, and deal with it. And the last method within the application, run advanced find, select the table called lists, then enable table permissions doesn't equal yes. Run it, and here's our leaking list. So we can open it straight up from here and say, hey, enable table permissions. So close, the results are now gone. And if we go ahead and rerun portal checker, the warning gone, and we fixed the problem. So the advice is, when you can, use Studio. Studio will enable table permissions regardless whether it's new portal or existing portal, and Studio will allow you to create web page access permissions in one click, and it will allow you easily create table permissions. And what's more, the Studio itself will warn you. We don't see the warning because I no longer have these, but if you do have anonymous data feeds or lists or forms that allow anonymous access, you will see a warning in the Studio flagging that behavior and calling for you to fix it. And if you want to know more about portal security, then go to 365.Training. We now have course, a portal security deep dive by Nick Dolman, available for free. So go ahead, enroll to that course, and Nick will walk you through all the bits and bobs, all the intricate details of portal security that I just skimmed over in this video. And as usual, like, subscribe, I'll see you next time.